Hey everybody, it's Chris over at Dixieland Farm, and today is like Christmas early because Sim Heaven released X America 2.0, and they've also released X Europe and X Asia. And the 2.0 is in reference to the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 data that they released to the public. Why they did that, I don't know, to make maybe they had open source patents that they had to, honor. Maybe they just wanted to be magnanimous. I doubt it. Maybe they needed other products to be tied into this data. So the data is they used their artificial intelligence when they were mapping the world for Flight Simulator 2020 and try to figure out this is a building, that's a building, that's a building, and figure out where in the world buildings were, right? And then how high the buildings are using all their different data. And the way Flight Simulator 2020 and Street Views and all that, they take all that imagery that they have and they like kind of paste it on the buildings, and that works very well, except for when you're low. When you're low, some buildings look like a nightmare. They're all melting, and that's just a limitation of the software. Anyway, that data got folded back into the public. So what Pilot Baloo did was he took that data and applied it into XPlane. So before he was using OpenStreetMap, which is a open source free, and that's what XPlane sort of uses the data of. And if people put in where buildings are, or they used public records or whatever, and that works out pretty well in Europe, where there is a large amount of data. Does not work very well in America, where there isn't a lot of data, except maybe in bigger cities. So using the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 data that's openly available, he applied it. And so now if there's a building in the world, it should have a building where it actually is. And instead of taking that satellite imagery and pasting it on, they just use data, art assets, and place them. So that art assets aren't dynamic, or because there's so many more buildings now, you kind of have to limit, and they used what was available, and there's some compromises there, but where there's a building, there should be a building. Great. So let's take a look at a couple of different places with stock scenery using the open source data that XPlane uses. And what XPlane does is just kind of, well, this is a suburb, this is a rural area, and kind of places in data, however, but not accurately, just kind of generally. If there's a city, there should be kind of a city. The problem is this makes things look very repetitive and sparse. And if you're flying VFR using your eyes, you expect to see certain things. And it doesn't always look like that. In X-Plane's world, there's like no shopping malls, there's no industrial parks, there's no gas stations, McDonald's, or anything like that. But in X America, there are, and there's a lot of them, and it looks great. So when I was flying on Long Island with the stock scenery, I'm like, hey, this doesn't look like Long Island at all. There's barely any density for 2.5 million people. But in X America, it certainly looks populated. So let's take some examples. Here is the farm. The farm has very little data. The different things on the ground is actually satellite imagery, where there should be my farm. As we pull away, we can kind of see the remnants of my farm and a bunch of nothing in the development here. Just flat with trees. Here we are back at the farm. We actually have farm buildings now. Now they aren't quite accurate. That would be the indoor on the left-hand side and the actual barn, but they are there. So is my neighbor. So is this entire housing development, which wasn't there before, including that housing development. And we also have the gas station at the intersection on the top left-hand of the screen. And you can see all the little different houses now that we did not have before. Okay, and here is Statesville, North Carolina, my local airport. And if we look around, also not a lot of buildings. You can see from the satellite imagery, there should be all these different industrial buildings. There aren't. These housing complexes and neighborhoods are a little sparse. And now you can see in the background, we have way more of a small city. You can see all the different houses that are now showing up that we didn't have before. And as we pull away, now in the more industrial or uh, commercial setting, you can see we have all these other buildings now that we didn't have before. Now, granted, the art assets don't look terrific when you're up close, but when you're in the sky like this, they look just fine. And we can see from the frames per second counter in the upper right hand corner, that's a little Lewis script that I wrote. We're doing great with frames per second. So it isn't too much of a hit because of the buildings being a little plainer. Uh, but I'd rather take density over quality of the buildings. And here we are in Charlotte. And for a city, not a lot of neighboring buildings here, especially if you look in the top corner. We can see way more density of buildings, different heights. As we look towards the city definitely looks bigger, many more objects, more variety of objects. And here's Farmingdale, Long Island. A little busier, but also a little repetitive. And a lot of these buildings are actually just flat satellite pictures. And finally, here we are in Farmingdale, and you can see Farmingdale now is way, way more filled with objects, variety of objects. Down here in the industrial area, we certainly have the correct type of buildings. By the way, I have a replacement tree product here, but you don't need that. It comes with Sim Heaven. The fact that I paid for it is the reason why I'm running it, but you can use the one that's in Sim Heaven. So the trees are going to be in most accurate place that opposed to stock XPlane, which kind of does what it wants. And there's reasons for that. So, but yeah, this looks way more like Long Island. And that is definitely a good thing. So one of the caveats of running this many objects is that your line of distance might need to be changed. So line of distance is how far it draws out things. So I actually have a little Lewis script that I have, and I've mapped a couple of keys to do like a low, medium, high. So for example, here's like low amount of objects, here's a medium amount of objects, and here's a high amount of objects. So if we look in the upper left-hand corner, with a low amount of objects, my frame rate jumped to 50. In medium objects, we drop to 40, and then with high, drop down to 30. So as long as you're above 20, you're doing fine for flying. And most of the time when you're looking out the window, it's not nearly a big of a hit. It's this kind of view where we're seeing the entire world. You get a bigger frame rate hit. But having those keys mapped, if you're struggling, then you can just hit a key real quick and reduce the amount of objects on the fly, which is great. When you're inside the cockpit itself, you can see, it's going to change depending where you are. So on an airport, believe it or not, your frame rate goes down because there are a lot of objects that are being drawn and thought about. But once you're flying, your frame rate usually goes up. Also included in X America and all the other X products is all little different things like aerials, landmarks, things like that. So now you've got cell towers and radio towers and everything that doesn't come with XPlane, which is also fantastic. So again, this product is free, though I do recommend you donating to the author. I certainly have in the past, and I am going to again because what an amazing product. Flight Simulator 2020 is a good product, but there are some flight characteristics and things that just aren't addressed. And after a year, they're still not addressed. XPlane, it's the opposite. The graphics and world isn't really rendered, but the avionics, the systems, the flying, the simulating of flying is number one, which is one reason why it doesn't come stock with all of these different add-ons, because they want your flying experience to be the most accurate that they can handle, and the graphics are secondary. You don't have to live with either or, and with this, you certainly don't have to live with either or. You can combine it and have a great experience. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Pilot Blue, for all your work on this, and Yeah. Also in the comments, I'll leave the little Lua scripts you can copy and paste if you'd like to make commands for that line of distance. So that way you can add and remove objects really quickly, and also my FPS counter that I took some. Both of these were adapted from other people's code, so they're not mine, but they're just what I needed, and I can give to you. So, for Dixieland Farm, take care.